Hello. This is the first in a pair of videos on document template management in Cobblestone Contract Insight. Conventionally, there are 3 steps to building and managing a document template. And in this video, we're going to cover that first step. And in the next video, we're going to cover steps 2 and 3. So let's jump into the system here. We are going to go to the main menu, down to Manage Setup, Document Templates and Clauses, Document Templates, and then down to the template list. Now, I do have quite a few document templates in my system. At the time of recording, there are no out-of-the-box document templates, but I believe we will have some soon. So you might have some depending on when you are watching this video. This list is broken down by area, so it defaults to contracts. But if you do want to see your templates about requests or counterparties or another record type, just choose that from the drop-down list. So if you come to this page looking for a certain template and you can't find it, it might just be in a different area. You can certainly go down and manage any of your templates by clicking Manage Edit. If you want, you can copy a template to make it a bit easier to make a new one. You don't have to start from scratch. But for today's purposes, we are going to make a new template from square one. We are going to go to the Action side menu and then click Create New Template. Here we have the overview for setting up a new template. And it is pretty straightforward. First, I'm going to type in a title. We'll call this our Consulting Agreement Sample. We can add a description if we'd like, and then choose a template area. This is the primary area of the system in which we are using the template, contracts, counterparties, e-procurement, etc. We're going to choose contracts today, as that is most common. And you'll notice that the template table will default to be contract details. That is the primary table in the contracts area. And you're almost always going to want to just leave that on the default value. It will default to different values depending on what you select, and it's usually good. When we have template type, this will also default to something. It's going to be set to document package, and you're going to leave that on document package, I'm willing to bet. There are some nuanced cases you would choose other items in this drop-down list for, but for the type of template that we're creating today, we're choosing document package. So for the most part, all I have to do is choose the template area, and then the rest of the decisions are made. Next is email on change. If you input your or someone else's email address here, you will be notified whenever someone makes a change to the configuration of the document template. Meaning if someone comes into this template manager and makes some changes, you'll be notified. Most folks don't do this because you probably trust the people with permissions to come in and make changes, but if you really do want to be on top of your templates, you can certainly put in your name here. You'll be notified anytime someone makes a change, but that does include you, so be aware of that. Is active template. If you want to use this template going forward, set this to yes. If you want to disable this template for some reason but don't want to delete it, which I wouldn't recommend anyway, put this to no. Participant authentication will be covered in more depth in the document collaboration and IntelliSign module videos, but just to cover this very quickly, if eventually you send this out for IntelliSign, e-approvals, or e-signatures, you might require the participants to add in a PIN number, or just set this as an open URL link, in which case they'll just be able to access it without any PIN. Right? This is really only used if you have that module, though. And then append Word documents. This will make a bit more sense in the next video when I show an example of this. But basically, append Word documents would combine any number of templates and Word documents that you have in the document package that we're creating. So you'll always have like a primary document template, but you can upload supporting documents or other templates to the broader package, in which case this would combine them quite literally into a larger Word document. You'll see what I mean in the next video. So right, that's the overview. For the most part, all you have to do is put in the name, choose the area, the rest will default, make sure it's set to active, and you're probably good to go. So now let's click Save. Okay, so now we're going to notice these steppers up at the top, steps 1 through 5. In these videos, we're primarily going to focus on steps 1, 2, and 4. And within some of the steps, we'll see individual tabs. So in this video, we're mostly going to focus on tabs 1 and 2. Now, as mentioned earlier, I break down template management into 3 steps. The first step is choosing the placeholders or the variables that will be merged into the document. So In this case, it would be choosing type name, choosing effective date, counterparty name, choosing these conditional placeholders right below. That's what we're doing here, okay? We're choosing the data that will be merged in. There are quite a few different types of placeholders, so that's what is going to consume our conversation right now. Step 2 is formatting the template. Basically, once you select a placeholder, that placeholder needs to be input into the Word document. So this step primarily takes place in Microsoft Word outside of Cobblestone. And we need to make sure we use the exact placeholders that Cobblestone provides us, including these hyphens and these curly brackets. All of that is going to be necessary for Cobblestone to properly merge in the data. So step 2 is formatting the document. There's a few other tips and tricks I'll provide when we get there. Step 3. Well, let me say this. At the end of step 2, we have a finished document template, right? We put in all the placeholders, we formatted. It's just the template we lives in Microsoft Word, like on our local computer. So step 3 is simply going back into Cobblestone and uploading that final version of the template. And then that's it. We finish the process. So again, in summary, step 1 is choosing the placeholders, choosing the variables. Step 2 is formatting the template in Word. And step 3 is uploading the final document into Cobblestone. So now let's start. We're going to go over to Mergeable Fields here, this next tab over. Now in Mergeable Fields, what we're going to do is choose the fields that are going to merge into the document. Straightforward enough, I think. Most organizations that I work with that are configuring document templates usually have an existing template that lives in Microsoft Word or SharePoint or something like that. If you don't, you probably have at least a contract that you've used before. That's sort of your go-to contract, in which case that we can pull that up. Either way, what we're trying to do is find what the variables are in that contract, right? Is it the effective date, the counterparty name, the expiration date, any major variables that are going to be replaced contract to contract, we want to make sure we identify here. So here I'll pull up an example. In this case, I might have different types of consultant agreements. So I'm going to replace the type name. Here's the effective date. I want to replace that. Here's the counterparty. I want to replace that. Here's some address information. I want to replace that. And then I have this reimbursement of expenses and renewal term clauses. I want to replace those too. Okay. So all I have to do is click Add. To start, I recommend switching this Add Multiple setting. Then you could choose the table that you're pulling information from. We're going to pull most of this information from contract details, which is, again, is the primary contract table. And then I could choose the fields I want to pull in and merge into the template. So we're going to start with contract type. There it is. We'll pull up the effective date. Okay. And I'll add a few more. We're going to fast forward a bit so you don't have to watch me do all of that, and then I'll click Save. Okay, so you can see I added a few fields. Fields added successfully. There are my 3 fields. Just to be thorough here, let me also acknowledge that some information might be pulling from other areas of the system. In this case, this address information is not necessarily held on the contract. In most systems, it's not. It's held on the vendor record. What I'll do in this case is add a field. And I'm not going to pull this from contract details like I did earlier. Instead of choosing contract details as my table, I'm going to choose vendors customers. This information is held on this table. So now I'm going to choose the appropriate fields from this table. And again, we'll fast forward a bit so you don't have to watch me add all of the address fields. But that's what I'm doing here. I'm just pulling address information from the vendor customer table. And now you can tell I've added those fields, the city, state, street 1, street 2, and zip code. Finally, you may want to add a few fields to be used as conditions. So here I have reimbursement of expenses and renewal term. I know that these are going to be conditional sections of the contract, so I will want to add fields to be used as those conditions. If this is too much for you to wrap your head around when you're first starting the template, it's not a big deal. You can always circle back to the field selection and then add these fields in later. But in my case, I know that the contract amount is going to be the condition for reimbursement of expenses. And I know that the yes, no renewal drop-down field will be my condition for my renewal term clause. So I'm going to quickly add those 2 fields in that will be used as conditions later. Again, if you don't know what your conditions will be yet, that's okay. You can always come back to this step. So to wrap us up, you'll see I added my contract amount field and my is this a renewable contract field. And by the way, to be perfectly clear, you may not have any conditional areas of your contract, in which case you would not have to do that at all. I'm just showing what would happen if you did want to include them. And if you did want to include address information from a different table. But the most essential thing here is to pull in information from the contract details table, which was the first batch of fields that we included. So now I want to fast forward a little bit. I am going to cover the rest of these tabs in this video, but first let me show you a quick highlight of steps 2 and 3. So once you choose fields or any other data points, you're going to notice this copy fields button. Okay, if you click copy, you're going to notice this extra pop-up near the top. So it says effective date with the curly brackets is copied to clipboard. So now if I go over to my document here and I can highlight the text I want to replace, I can click Control V and it'll replace that text. Okay, so that would work, right? Includes the curly brackets, hyphens, and all that. This is the language that Cobblestone is looking for. And basically, I would wash, rinse, repeat that process, copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, and have all of the data points that I'm looking for. And then I can simply just save this and upload this to the system in step 3. That's the fundamental process here. If you understand that, you're in good shape. But now let's jump back to the system. So let's move forward. Let's move over to rules and conditions. Setting up rules and conditions on the template is totally optional. This will determine when the template is going to be suggested on a record, when it's not. So if you don't set up a condition, the template will always be suggested. If you set up a condition, the template will only be suggested when the conditions are met. And this could usually be pretty simple. I'll add an expression here. So I'm going to choose contract type equals consulting agreement. So now this consulting agreement template will only appear when I'm on a consulting agreement. You can most definitely add other conditions if you want to and make this more complex as needed, but most folks just set up pretty simple conditions when they're setting these up. I'll click Save and Preview, and there we go. Next, we have clause library references. Now, if you didn't know, Cobblestone has a clause library, which functions as a repository of all of your clauses and legal language. As a quick tangent, that clause library lives in Manage Setup, Document Templates and Clauses. We can head down here to the clause library. The clause library does not come populated out of the box, but you can add clauses to it. You could also do a bulk data import to the library. And if you want to add a clause, all you need to do is go to Add Clause on the left-hand side. And I have many other data points and fields assigned to my clauses, but all you have to do out of the box is type in the name of the clause and the text, the body of that clause. So once you have clauses in the library, you can click Add Clause here, and then choose the clause you want from the drop-down list. For my example, I'm going to choose reimbursement of expenses. And I'll click Save. Okay, so now this clause will be available as a placeholder if I copy it. But if you're adding a clause, you most likely also want to add conditions to that clause. So I'm going to click this caret icon here, click Rules, and then set up whatever rule I'd like. Again, you need to make sure that the field you want to use as a rule is selected back in the Mergeable Fields tab. I already did that. It was contract amount. So in this case, I'm going to say the contract amount must be greater than $5,000, just as an example. Click Save, and then voila. I can most definitely copy this and paste it. What I would do is I would just replace this whole section with just that placeholder, and I'll turn my red lines off. And there we go. Okay, and you can do that to your heart's content. You could set up any number of clauses and set conditions to them to determine when they are used. So this makes the language of your contract dynamic. Next, we have mergeable clauses. Mergeable clauses are not used as frequently. The first thing I want you to understand about mergeable clauses is that I prefer to call these mergeable sections. I think that is a more apt name for the feature. So what these really do is they allow you to merge in a dynamic section of an agreement. That could be an exhibit, a section, it could be a series of clauses, it could be an image, it could be addenda, whatever you want. It's basically a section of the contract, and we do set conditions to them to determine when these mergeable sections are going to be used. Okay. The second thing to know is that these are formatted as small templates. So it could look like this. So here's a renewable term contract, and this is not just a standard clause because you can tell there are some placeholders inside of this, right? Like that company name and this expiration date. These are placeholders. So if you ever want a dynamic section of the contract to merge in, and that section itself has some variables within it, we definitely want to use mergeable clauses or mergeable sections. I might cover these in more detail in a later video, but to be honest, the setup of them is very, very similar to document templates. You are basically setting up a document template. It's just a kind of a child document template, and it's going to merge into the parent document template. These are set up under Manage Setup, document templates and clauses, document templates, and then the mergeable clause list. They are a little bit more advanced. I don't see most organizations use these because they're just going to be more complex. You need to have fairly complex needs of your document templates to make these really worth your while. But if you do have more complex templates, this is a really, really great feature to meet any more advanced requirements. That's what mergeable sections are. In this case, we will add one. I already have this one in my system, which is my renewal clause section. So I'm just going to click assign clause. Then I'll just choose the section I want to include from my drop-down list. I'll go with this one, which I called renewal term dynamic clause. All right, there are some settings I can toggle. I can change the display name, any message that would appear if it is not used. Do want to include a line break that's standard, the number of breaks I want, and then the clause owner. So if you select an owner here, they can be notified if there are changes made to the content of that mergeable section. But I won't choose one in this case, and I'll hit save. So there we go. The mergeable clause has successfully been added, and it really works the same way as before, where I can set conditions, set up a rule, and I'll say that is this a renewable contract must equal yes. I'll save that. And again, I can copy it and pop it into my document. Okay, there we go. Next, we have static content. Static content is used for a very specific thing, which is really just date stamping your contracts. I can click add content. You're going to leave this content type on current date. The other option here is plain text, but I don't really see that used. I'll just type in today's date as the title. Choose the format of the date. I'll just go with day, month, year, and then click save. And now, if I put in this placeholder, it will date stamp the agreement. Next, we're going to move into the subtable setup, which is the last placeholder type we are going to address. And before I click add subtable, let me pull up a quick example of what a subtable merged onto a document template could look like. So here's an example of a subtable on a merged document template. It's a small table that includes two columns, in this case, services and service hours. And you could really merge any subtable that you wish. Oftentimes it's used for financials of some sort, work orders, invoices, things like that, but you could really merge in any subtable you want. Again, and really the setup in the system is pretty straightforward. You're just going to choose the subtable you want to include. Let's go with this contract financial subtable as an example, and then click save. Then click your caret icon here and add fields. Check add multiple, and you could just go down the list and check which fields from that subtable you want displayed. So these will be the column headers that are merged into the contract. I recommend not choosing too many because they'll end up being pretty small, but I'll just go through this list and add a few. So I've added a few fields. I selected this drop-down list, and then I'm able to see those fields. And by the way, you can set up conditions to the individual fields and to the subtable itself. I can click Set Display Conditions, and that will determine when this subtable is actually used or not. Again, if you don't set up conditions, it will display automatically. If you do set up conditions, it will only display when the conditions are met. And I'm not going to set up conditions in this case. I'll just click the X, and that wraps up step 1. All in all, we talked about the template overview, mergeable fields, all the way down through static content, and then we talked about subtable setup. Really what we discussed here is the basic setup, but also how to choose all of your various placeholders and what they do. A lot of folks just cover the template overview and then mergeable fields. So don't worry about many of these other tabs if you don't plan to use them. The fundamentals here are just template overview and mergeable fields. In the next video, we're going to talk about what I would consider steps 2 and 3, quote unquote, of setting up a document template, which is going to be formatting that template and then uploading it back to the system. Thank you.